Hello, welcome to the Professor Knits podcast. My name is Nikki and I'm your host. You can also follow me on Instagram as the Professor Knits. And if you're looking for me over on Ravelry, I am Medusa Yarn over on Ravelry. So please join me. And I don't use Facebook a whole lot, but I am there as Medusa Yarn and Fiber. You guys, I'm so over this quarantine. I know we're all in this together, and I know everybody is just as tired of it as I am, but holy man, I'm feeling it. It's pretty insane. And I'm looking at my quarantine hairstyle and thinking, oh my goodness, I need a haircut so bad. Why? Why did I cancel that hair appointment like 2 weeks before this all happened? Anyhow, I'm coming to you today from Knoxville in East Tennessee, and I can hear some little munchkin coming with me with a big bag of cheese balls. Total crap food.
Yum, yum.
Share with your brother and don't have too much. I'll be up soon, okay? What are you gonna do? I'm far beyond trying to have any sense of order around here. We do still do homeschool in the mornings for my son because he's in first grade, finishing up first grade. But they've dialed it back so much, understandably, because things were kind of insane. And yeah, so in the mornings we're still doing work around here, but not in the afternoon. Although, I mean, my knitting bestie, Meredith, who's moved to Los Angeles last year, she and I were sort of commiserating about what's happening. She's got a son just a few months younger than mine, maybe not quite a year younger than mine. And really, she sagely reminded me that Minecraft, the video game Minecraft, is absolutely part of STEM research. And, you know, at first I kind of laughed and was like, yeah, I'm in there with you. Minecraft is good for the brain. But you know what, the other night, my husband and I were relaxing and we could overhear Oscar and Amadea, my daughter, talking. And he's taught her how to play Minecraft and she's only 4. He's taught her how to play Minecraft during this quarantine. And I overheard them talking to each other about, I don't know anything about this game. My husband does though. Talking about like what sword they needed to get to what material, like on their crafting table, like what was best to mine diamonds versus obsidian versus emeralds. And they were right, like what they were talking about in terms of the hardness of the different rocks and what they would need to, or gems, I guess, or what they would need to spawn, whatever that means in this game. And like at one point, Amadea, when she was playing, she had sheep. So of course my interest tweaks. And she turns to me and she's like, Mommy, I just cut my sheep's hair. She said, I'm like, oh, you shorn your sheep. She's like, yeah, now they're naked. And I said, well, that's okay. She's like, can I glue it back on? I don't like them like this. I want them to have their hair back. And I just thought it was adorable because she was learning about wool and shearing sheep through Minecraft. So yeah, it's come to that in my household where now I consider Minecraft school for my kids. If you are a parent of young ones who are video game age, you know what I'm talking about. We got desperate times call for desperate measures. So yeah, it's pretty insane. But the kids don't seem to notice that they haven't left the house except to go for a drive. We did a drive-by happy birthday for one of Oscar's friends who turned 7. So sad that was his birthday party, but we did one of these drive-by happy birthdays, and that was last weekend. And the kids have not left the house except like to play in the yard or the park across the street, which they can't really do anymore now anyway, in nearly a month. And they haven't really noticed it. They are aware of the coronavirus and that they can't go to school and they can't see their friends, but they're having the time of their lives. I'm so jealous of them. They don't really notice. So, yeah. So what about knitting? This is a knitting podcast. Well, I've got 2 finished objects. The first one I'm going to show you is my Auspice shawl by Lisa Mutch. It's a 1 skein shawl that I was knitting. I guess I cast it on maybe 6 weeks ago, maybe a little less. And I finished it for a friend. It's a gift, so I'm going to give this one away. I do really like it though. And it's a 1 skein shawl, and it's a fairly straightforward, simple pattern, but it is still a little bit sophisticated. The majority of it is garter stitch, so it's a nice stretchy material. And then these holes are achieved with, of course, dramatic yarn overs. But the shaping of it, including these panels that have the huge holes, is all done by short row shaping. So while it's definitely an easy, manageable pattern, there still is some sophistication to the construction compared to other shawls, and I really quite like it. So Lisa Mutch Auspice, I knitted it in Medusa Yarn and Fiber on the Titans base, so that's 75% superwash merino and 25% nylon. And I dyed it up especially for this woman. So I only dyed, and this, look how much I have left. This was 1 skein, and it's a really good size, and that's how much I have left. My scale isn't in front of me, but it's got to be at least 20 grams. And I dyed up 3 skeins of it, and I've got 2 left, which I'll throw up on my shop, on my website for sale, Medusa Yarn and Fiber, or just medusayarn.com, pardon me. I didn't name it since I was just looking for something for this woman, but it's really quite pretty. It's got lots of pinks, some purples, some blues, and some browns to sort of ground it and give it that earthy tone. So I really enjoyed it, and I'll put those up on the website for sale if anybody's interested. Oh, and speaking of which, I'm having a 30% off store-wide sale. So my philosophy is that you should support your local yarn store, whether it's through a gift card or if you can get a delivery, or a local dyer. So if I'm local to you, if not, you can still go ahead and buy my yarn and go to the website, but please go local first. It's very important that we do this as locally as possible. All right. Yeah, Medusa Yarn and Fiber, Lisa Mutch's Auspice shawl. A nice little gift for a friend. My other works in progress, I am wearing it, and it is the Reagan Cardigan by Isabel Kraemer. Now, here, I'm going to move my chair out of the way to give you a better idea. I'm actually podcasting from my little yarn studio. I don't normally do it because it's not great lighting in the basement. But the kids are upstairs playing Minecraft, and the only way I could get away from them was to come downstairs. Anyways, Lisa Mutch, Isabel Kraemer's Reagan Cardigan. Now, I really like it, and I'll talk about the construction in just a minute, but I have to redo the bind off along the bottom. I don't know what I was thinking, but I just did a regular bind off. It has no stretch and no give. I should have done a stretchy bind off. So while I like the way the cardigan fits, it's kind of the kind that comes down your shoulders and it's not meant the way it ended up for me. It's meant more to come down the sides here, and it's got this pretty lace work. But if I want to pull it forward, it looks really funny because the bottom edge has absolutely no give. talk about an amateur mistake that I haven't made in years of knitting garments. I learned after knitting my very first knitted sweater, which I've never shown, like this is years ago, and I don't think I've ever shown it on the podcast. It's not a very wearable sweater because of that. Like I did a regular bind off and there's absolutely no give. So it feels like I've got this tight string around. So anyways, I'm going to redo the bind off and do a stretchy bind off. Okay, so let me talk to you about this cardigan. It was one of the most unusual constructions I've ever done so far. And I've mentioned this before. You do the sleeves from one end all the way across the back. You see all that stockinette stitch before the lace starts? All of that across in one big tube, except that there's this opening here where your shoulders are going to go. And then once that's done, and it's kind of weird because you get the bulk of the knitting done first. And then you knit this beautiful Harbell lace pattern to create the rest of the body. Now, the way that it was intended on Isabel Kraemer's Ravelry page for the pattern is a lot bigger and more cozier than what I ended up with. And I think part of that is just yarn choice, like this particular yarn. I think most of what she's knits in is more of a woolen spun yarn, and I think this is probably, a worsted spun yarn, and I think this is a worsted spun, I believe. So it's not quite as woolly. It's beautiful. I loved it. It's the Mirasol Legato yarn in a fingering weight in this beautiful charcoal gray. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? I highly recommend it. And my experience with, especially with something like this with a cardigan, is not to get my hopes up that what I'm knitting is going to end up like what I see there on her pattern page. I've kind of learned that with these more complicated knits. But because it is kind of complicated when you're trying to wrap your mind around it, but the actual knitting is easy. But yeah, I really love it. And I've kind of let go of the fact that it didn't end up the way hers was, because I quite like the way it's ended up. It kind of just hangs nicely over the shoulders. And I guess what I'm trying to say is if you look at her pattern page, the triangles that make this edge kind of come up and it looks quite chic. That didn't happen with mine. And again, it must have been a yarn choice. I'm not too sure, or maybe it might bind off, who knows. But I really, really like it. I highly suggest it, and maybe knit a size bigger than you'd expect to knit, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it's I really, really enjoyed knitting it. It's taken me a while. I've had it on the needle since the fall, because gray yarn, as fantastic as the finished product is, and what an essential color it is in a yarn stash, it's not fun to knit, like the color. And so I did get tired of it. The lace part is not that hard. It's a fairly easy pattern repeat to remember. The hardest part for me was picking up the stitches and getting, because she doesn't give you an exact stitch count. She just gives you, pick up so many stitches in so many rows. Make sure you end on a number divisible by whatever. And so I found that tricky, because if you didn't pick up enough stitches, it would completely ruin the look. If you picked up too much, it would completely ruin the look, but she didn't say how many. And I tend to like to follow things to the T. Yeah. If you haven't knit an Isabel Kraemer garment, you definitely should, because she's got some beautiful, beautiful designs. All right, a few other things that I've been doing. During this quarantine period, I have been watching the Arne and Carlos quarantine videos because, I mean, everybody knows about Arne and Carlos. I really like their knitting aesthetic. I like them, but I don't watch their podcast a whole lot because it's mostly tutorials, which is handy when I need it. But it's a very high quality produced podcast, kind of like Fruity Knitting. But Fruity Knitting has all these different interviews. I don't know, I just love Fruity Knitting, as you all know. The Arne and Carlos, as much as I love it, I don't really tune in, but I have been tuning in for their quarantine videos because they're doing it all by themselves, and it's, you know, just regular production, kind of like the rest of us, right, who don't have fancy production team. So they've been doing this knit along, the quarantine knit along, and I found out about it about 10 days in, so I'm very late to the party. And I have 4 of these squares done. So they're having people do squares. Oh, sorry, I have 5 squares that will ultimately become a pillow, or you can keep going and make something bigger. And here's an example of one of the squares. It's all color work. It says love, and I think all of the different squares, they release a pattern a day. Go check it out. And they are inspired by nature, mostly flowers. Now, it calls for DK and just to go stash diving, and that's what I'm doing, but I find that I have a set amount of DK weight in stash, but I have a lot in worsted weight as well. So I'm making 2 sets. I'm going to make a bunch of DK and I'm making a bunch of worsted, and it's just sort of whatever I feel like knitting with at the time. So this was some DK yarn, and I know I've knit mitts in these 2 colors. It's a yarn I picked up in Loop in London. I don't remember anymore what it is, but I do remember it was the day I met Ellie from Skein-Deer Knits there, and she helped me pick out a bunch of yarn. I think this might have been it. I can't remember anymore. Another one in DK that I'm doing, these next 2 I'm going to show you aren't blocked yet, so they're kind of hard to see. But I think I can't remember which one this is, but it's some flower. So I've got it on dark purple and yellow. And I had a lot of this left over. This is Medusa Yarn and Fiber DK weight. And I had a lot of it left over from when I did Andrea Mowry's night shift cowl in a lot of this yarn. And so I did this one, and then I reversed the colors, and I think this was their sunflower pop. So the purple is the back and the yellow is the front, sort of the color. So these ones I didn't find too difficult. The worsted weight ones I had done first, and I'll show you them now. Isn't it gorgeous? Red, I think this is Malabrigo yarn, and the brown is Medusa Yarn and Fiber. And then this one is, the blue is Medusa Yarn and Fiber, a non-superwash. And then the white, I think, is Shalimar in the Sand Dollar. I mean, these are all just scraps anyway, but now, this was the very first one I did, and followed by this one in the worsted weight. And then I did the DK, and this was the first time I've ever done color work where you have to purl it. Okay, so going back and forth. Hey, not bad, huh? My floats are pretty nice. Let me tell you, it was a challenge, because whenever I've done color work, it's always been on yokes that I've knitted in the round. This was challenging to purl color work, so it was a first for me. And so tension, I had a lot of tension problems. Fortunately, it blocked out quite nicely. Let me see if I'm as proud as my floats on this one. No. Not bad. Well, anyways, up close, you can see a lot of the tension problem. And that was particularly the case with this one when I was blocking them. You can see a lot of tension problems. So that was a first for me, purling, color work purl. And I'm just gonna take my time working my way through my remnant stash to keep making purl DK weight and worsted weight squares that will always forever remind me of the quarantine epidemic. And I think I'll probably just make them into pillows. So a worsted weight one and a DK weight one. Now I have a lot of remnant fingering weight that I could hold double, but I'm not going to do that until I need to. I really want to get rid of all my remnants in my worsted and DK. All right. So those are what I have finished. Now I have 2 active work in progresses that I've started. And I'll show you the first one that I have not yet shown you. And I'm knitting a pattern by Jennifer Wood from her Refined Knits book. I apologize for the glare. Now, Jennifer Wood is local to me. She is here in Knoxville. And I have an autographed book from her book launch. And let me read it to you. It says, Peggy, thank you so much for coming. You need to get your knitting back something. You need to get your knitting back on, exclamation point. Enjoy your knitting adventures. Love, Jennifer. So you might be wondering, who the hell is Peggy? Well, Peggy is a woman that I know who works with my husband, another person who works with my husband, who knows that I'm a knitter. And she, I guess, maybe knit at some point and isn't much of a knitter because it says in there, you need to get your knitting back on. I think that's what it says. Back out. You need to get your knitting back out. So clearly she doesn't knit anymore. And her husband and Jennifer Wood's husband are besties, or best friends. I don't know. Can you say bestie for men? Straight men? I don't know. So she and Jennifer know each other. But it's their husbands who have the friendship. So when she found out that I am a huge knitter, she asked me if I like Jennifer Wood's designs. I'm like, yes, I've never knit one, but I know she's from Knoxville, this and that. So she gave me this book. Now, I'm sure, I've never met Jennifer Wood, but I think I've seen her in interviews, and I think she'd have a pretty good sense of humor about it. But I really, really appreciated it when Peggy gave it to me. I still need to knit something for Peggy, but if she's a knitter herself, well, I don't know. I guess clearly she's not. Anyway, back to the project. I decided to knit this beautiful sleeveless top called the Vivian Pullover. And it calls for Shibui yarn in staccato, which is a 70% wool, 30%, and I have my baggie of it somewhere, 30%, oh, right in front of me, 30% silk, pardon me. All right, and I happen to have 5 skeins of this in this gorgeous color called Blueprint. I had picked it up from Loopville, my local yarn store, on clearance, and there was only 5 skeins. And when I grabbed it, I didn't have a project in mind, and I knew that, because it's only just under 200 yards per skein. So even though it's fingering weight, and I can usually do a fingering weight garment with 3, even less than 3 skeins, depending on the pattern, I knew I had to be careful. So I grabbed all 5, and because they were on sale, and didn't have a project for them. And then I was looking through this book that I still haven't knit from and saw it and thought, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to knit. I probably should be knitting the one that calls for 6 skeins, like the smallest size that calls for 6 skeins. But what I'm doing is I'm knitting the one that has 5 skeins, the largest size that still has 5 skeins, and I've made a few alterations and adding some stitches, so I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. So where is it? I've been knitting quite a bit on this, and I have the top all done. Sorry, it's in a garment bag, and because of the silk, it kind of gets creasy. Let me just get my needles here. And so here we go. It's knit from the top down, and you start out knitting the front and backs. You start out knitting the back. You can see that's the back. And then you attach, when you're ready to start the front, when you just do the yoke, sort of the shoulder shaping, and you're ready, you you start the front by attaching to it. It's really nice. I really like the construction. And then there's the front, because it's got that droopy neck, as you can see in the photo. I really like that scoopy neck. Not a scoop. I don't know what kind of neck that is. A shawl neck? Scoopy shawl neck? So I've done that so far, and I've just gotten down to the point where I'll be starting the, hold on, sorry. Isn't that a stunning blue? Okay, I'm getting this together now. So I've just knit down to the part where she's calling now for me to begin the lace work at the bottom. But I think I'm going to knit it a little bit longer because it's just long enough to reach under my breasts, and I want to make sure I don't start too soon. So this, as you can see, if I bring it in, there's this beautiful, very delicate lace part at the bottom. So I've just finished the body part. Now I'm about to start this part. And then that beautiful scalloped edging. I apologize for the glare. Yeah, I have to say, one thing that, I mean, it's a beautiful pattern, very interesting, sophisticated construction. I really, really like it. And one thing that is sort of a drawback from these beautiful books that are just gorgeous, like they're coffee table books, is that because of the design and the layout, sorry, I'm not showing you anything I shouldn't show. In order to keep down the cost of the book, oh, so pretty. There's a certain amount of words, right, that goes into these. What am I trying to say? Those of you who are in publishing probably know what I'm trying to say. When I buy a pattern on Ravelry that's only published through Ravelry, the patterns are usually just incredibly detailed, like row by row, and everything's written out. You know who's fantastic for that is Helen Stewart for the Shawl Society. I mean, every single row is out for you. And you can do that when you're just creating a PDF that you're selling. In these books, they have an economy of words. And so you have to really, I find, pay attention. And it's not that a beginner can't do it, but I do remember years and years ago, one of the first garments I ever tried to knit was out of a Louisa Harding book, Nouveau Knits. And like hadn't been knitting for very long, and I decided, oh, I'm gonna knit this beautiful sweater, right? And I still want to knit it, and I actually did knit it, but I didn't know what I was doing, and because I didn't quite understand how to read a pattern in a published book that's going to be a little bit terser than a pattern on Ravelry. I don't even think I knew about Ravelry at this point. It ended up being a disaster. Fortunately, it was affordable yarn. It was a Cascade yarn, but I didn't know I didn't know how to follow the instructions in the book. I didn't know how to follow the pattern. And I think when it said work, like I think I was purling when I should have been knitting. I don't know, but it ended up being something that you could hardly fit on a Barbie doll, to make a long story short. But I think I will return to this book now that I'm a better knitter in terms of understanding how to read a pattern from a book like this versus a Ravelry pattern that is so detailed and so informative. At the end of the day, they're all giving you the same information. It's just the delivery is very different. I only cast this on not that long ago, so I'm very, very proud of how fast, well, not proud, excited maybe, about how fast this is knitting up, because that means I'll be able to wear it this summer. Like this spring when it's still chilly. But it's a very elegant, beautiful drape, beautiful, beautiful yarn. And it was a year ago that I was knitting the Athens tank top in that linen. So it's kind of a similar in Shibui Knits linen. So clearly around this time of year, I like to knit tank tops in blue. But this is a much different experience. Like I said, I've kind of swore off knitting in linen for the foreseeable future. It's just not what I like to do. Okay, so that's my main work in progress. And just today, I cast on another garment that everybody seems to be knitting these days or talking about knitting. Oh, and I should also mention that in the one by Jennifer Woods, the Vivian Pullover, I went a size up with the needle. It's supposed to be knit in a size 3, and I'm knitting it in a size 4 just to give me a nice loose drape. All right, so my other cast on is the City Limits Pullover by Tanis Lavely from Tanis Fiber Arts. I've never knit any of her patterns before that I can ever remember, nor have I ever used her yarn. So this is a first for me, knitting one of her patterns. And desperate times, like I said, desperate times call for desperate measures. Because for some reason, I don't know what's going on with my needles, but I don't have a pair of interchangeable needles on 5mm, which is a size 8. I do have a pair in the licky, whatever, wooden needles, but they're fixed and they're way too long. They're like a 40-inch. So I don't, and this you have to knit in the round. So and you know, it's not that easy just to get a pair of needles like that. No, you know, normally I just jump in my car and go to Loopville or go to Yarn Haven. But you can't do that nowadays. And even though some yarn stores are still doing sales, you know me as I know you. When you want to cast it on, you want to cast it on now. So I'm kicking it up old school. Now I just started, so there's not a whole lot to show. But I'm kicking it up old school and doing it on DPNs. Look at that. Now, another first for me is not DPNs. I've knitted with DPNs quite a bit in the past, but this is the first time I've done short row shaping on DPNs. And it's the exact same principle of doing short row. This just looks like a mess, right? It's the same principle as doing short row shaping when you're knitting in the round, but everything's more fiddly with DPNs, as you guys know. So that's what I'm doing. I'm looking forward to doing sort of a cozy sweater that has the reverse stockinette stitch, so the purl bumps are on the outside. A lot of people are knitting it, and they seem really happy with what a quick knit it is. So I decided the pattern calls for 5 skeins of fingering weight that you hold together to create that fade. Now, so what I decided to do instead was haul out some old yarn on an old base that I no longer dye up, just to kind of get rid of it. And it's a pink gradient that I had done years ago when I had first started dyeing yarn. So the very lightest is this really light, soft pink. And then we go to a slightly darker, and this is my worsted weight. Then slightly darker, and slightly darker, and slightly darker. So here's my gradient that I'm doing it in. And I think it'll look really nice. I'm just doing the worsted weight. I'm not holding 2 strands of fingering together. If I had enough mohair, I'd probably mohair it too, but I just don't have enough. And again, I wanted to cast this on today. Yeah, so a couple of, it's very exciting, and I think what I am going to do is put in a call to one of my local yarn stores for some 32-inch circulars, size 8, 5mm, and switch over from the DPNs. But in order to get this started today, I had to use my DPNs, which is okay. It's the way we used to have to knit before circulars were invented. To this, I still know a lot of knitters to this day who will not go to circulars. They still do DPNs. They swear that at least not from Magic Loop, they swear that Magic Loop causes a gap. I like Magic Loop. Not for a sweater, of course. All right, so yeah, beautiful gradient. Well, I hope everybody's doing well. I've already put on the Quarantine 5. I'm well on my way to the Quarantine 15. It's tough. These are really tough times. I hope everybody's doing well. Please feel free to chat with me in the comments below. I don't have them disabled, but depends on which browser you're on. They might come across as disabled. But I really hope everybody's at least hanging in there and hasn't been overly devastatingly affected too much by what's happening in the world. And let's just hang in there and get through this. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and hit the like button and the notification button so that you'll know whenever I upload a new video. All right, take care and have a good day.